So right now, police are investigating whether the death of a UC Riverside student was the result of...
Fraternity at the University of Oklahoma is facing a hazing scandal.
Tragic case of alleged fraternity hazing at Penn State.
Now to that fraternity death at a New York college.
7 months of questions. Courtney White believes she and her family will finally get answers in the hazing death of her 19-year-old cousin.
3 pledges at a local college fraternity get battered and bruised.
He hasn't moved. He's probably in the ambulance.
Okay, how old is he?
He is 19? Yeah, 19 years old.
Daniel Weck quietly appeared in Livingston County Court last week, pleading guilty to taking part in the drinking activities that ultimately led to the death of fellow student Armin Partamian.
Who was Armand Partamian?
Okay, so Armand was my younger brother. I have an older brother who's 5 years older than me, and then Armand, who is almost 14 years younger than me. So needless to say, I was like a second mom to him. He was everything to me. I did everything with him as he grew up. Armand was smart, handsome. He was very musical. He started playing the piano at 3, taught himself how to play guitar, and then became a drummer. So he knew his music. He was athletic, and I think I said he was smart. Yeah, he was one of those kids that didn't need study and yet got hundreds on his test. I was a little jealous even though I was 14 years older. But yeah, that was Armand, and he was my little brother, and I loved him. I still do. I love him very much.
How did his death affect you and your family's lives?
Okay, I mean, death affects everybody's lives. Armand was extremely rough for us. So let me backtrack a little bit. The day before we found out that Armand had passed away, our older brother and his wife had just given birth to their second child. So they live in Virginia Beach. So I get the call. Anne had the baby. It's a boy. His name is Jack, named after our dad. And it was just so joyous. We were all so excited. Great Saturday. I remember it's a Saturday. And actually, believe it or not, that same day, Armand had called me, and he was at a party. And he had called me to ask me about a song that we both liked when he was growing up, and just to say hello and everything. And I remember giving him the name of the song and saying, be careful, have fun, and everything. Next day is Sunday, regular Sunday afternoon. My mother calls and she tells me, you need to sit down. I have something to tell you. And I knew something was wrong. And for some reason, I thought it was something wrong with my dad. And then she told me that Armand had passed away. I froze. I screamed. I fell to my knees and I handed the phone over to my husband. I just couldn't believe that this was happening and everything. Yeah, my mom told me that he had passed away from alcohol poisoning while being hazed at a college fraternity. Like, you hear these things happening, but you never in a million years think that it would happen to you and your family. And part of it that was really rough was because it happened at a college, at a fraternity, it was very public. So as we, as a family, were going through the steps of the early morning and telling people what happened and making those contacts, people were contacting us because they heard it over the radio. They saw it on the news. And that's really rough, to have news people coming to your family's door trying to ask you questions and stuff when you're in mourning. You know, not everybody has to deal with a death in the public, and we did. And that was very hard and stressful for my family. And it was also very hard and stressful for my parents because his college was 6 hours away. So they couldn't even go to him right away. They had to and they have friends come and help them and bring them over to, identify his body and all this stuff. It was such an insane, crazy moment. and in time for my family. And I don't wish that upon anybody, to have to go through what we went through. And, you know, we had his funeral, and there were so many people. The college actually set up a bus to have kids from the school come. And I've never seen anything like this, because he was so young and he had everything going for him. And just because of one stupid thing at a college party, it ended in an instant. You know, he was studying to become a doctor. He was studying to be somebody to go and help save people's lives. He was a junior firefighter EMT. He was already doing the things that he was meant to do to help other people. And now he can't do that. He's gone. And I always wonder, like, what life would have been like for my family if he had stayed around. You know, he'd be in his early 30s by now. You know, would he be married? Would he have children? Would he have actually become a doctor? These are all these things that we always wonder. You know, it took a huge toll on my parents. They lost their little boy. They had state troopers come to their house to tell them that their son was gone. Can you just imagine that knock on your door? It was just a huge traumatic experience for us. And it took a while for all of us to just kind of get back to some kind of normalcy, you know. But we did. We're a very strong family, and we were able to get through this. Even, you know, almost 13 years later, this is his anniversary month of his death, and it will be 13 years. But we talk about him all the time. We tell stories about him. I show my children videos of him. Only Oriana is the only one who has some kind of memory of him, because she was almost 6 when he passed. But my younger 2 children, my youngest one, Thomas, never even met him. He was born a year later. And my middle daughter, she was only 2, so she really doesn't remember him. But yet they know so much about him because of everything that we talk about. And we're not afraid to tell his story, because his story is so important to help others, you know, so that this does not happen again, because it happens, and it happens a lot, unfortunately. So if people know and say this, you know, this can happen, and it does happen, but there are things that you can do to avoid it, then there was some kind of meaning or little purpose to his passing, because maybe then somebody else who was in that same situation will not be. Armand, he was a great guy, and I wish people got to know him more than they did. 19 years wasn't enough time.
So I was planning on interviewing my grandparents on the topic, but I'm unable to reach them at the moment because they are in Florida, retired, you know. So I sent them the questions and I recorded their answers on a piece of paper. So I'm gonna read them out loud. His death was very difficult to deal with. It was a shock learning that he died from alcohol poisoning. We dealt with so many emotions, unbelievable sadness and hurt. We blamed ourselves for what had happened. We dealt with it because we had 2 other children to worry about and to help them cope and grieve. We were fortunate to have good friends and family to help us deal with the death. Not a day goes by that we don't think about him and what his life would have been like now. The Rochester DA pressed charges against those responsible for the hazing. A plea bargain was made where they had spent the weekend in jail for 6 months and 5 years of probation.
Okay, do you know what hazing is?
Hazing is a form of peer pressure that typically occurs between frat initiations and parties. It's consuming an insane amount of alcohol forced by someone who's typically older than you, and it's unsupervised and not brought to someone's attention until something wrong is.
What should you do when you see someone in danger due to alcohol?
Personally, if I noticed it, I would go up to them and just try to get them out of the situation as fast as possible. Bring them to the bathroom, some place where no one is, get them water. I know it's a little like TMI, but I would help them throw up just to get everything out of their system. And if they start to go unconscious, of course I'd call 911 and bring someone who's medically trained to the party and help them out.
Okay guys, ready? What was it like being in a fraternity?
Being in a fraternity was a lot of fun. It was a chance to meet different people, being part of a group, being part of a community, a family in college, especially when you're away from home. It gives just some like-minded people just an opportunity to be together.
Okay, good. And then, have you ever seen an incident in your fraternity due to alcohol or hazing, or just in college in general? Have you ever seen anything like that?
So there's a lot. That's a huge question to ask. So I'll start with the hazing. Thankfully, a lot of the schools really started implementing different things about hazing. You can lose your chapter, you could get into serious trouble if you kind of violate some of those hazing things. Most of the hazing rituals were basically staying up really late, doing a lot of push-ups, things like that. And it was actually just kind of helping you learn the history of the fraternity. There wasn't too many like bad things that happened. There was no like physical abuse. There was one night of alcohol, but it wasn't like you're forced to drink this. We actually had in my pledge class someone who was on medication and couldn't drink alcohol, and they were like, "All right, no problem. You don't have to do anything with that." The hazing aspects of that, that's pretty much like with the hazings. The problems you often found with alcohol were especially younger students that would come in. So when I was living in my fraternity house, I was a junior, and a lot of freshmen would go to the parties at our house, and you would see kids just not know their limits. A lot of times in my fraternity, we were like pretty good about it. We'd see people like reaching limits, especially like freshman girls, and then we would walk them home. Like, you're like, no, you're done, you're going home. Just really to make sure of it. There were some incidents like in pledging on, they call it Hell Night. Basically, there's a lot of things, and it's a lot of things to build trust. And what happens as you're in it, you don't realize certain things, but a lot of the other people in there were drinking alcohol, and they weren't the best supervisors. So there were sometimes that can happen, like some things can happen, but it's never really, there's nothing really where you're in danger. Anything they do on that night it's all perceived danger. You know, like say, they say, all right, you're gonna jump on glass. And you look down and there's a pile of glass, and you're like, jump down. And they move the glass and it's Doritos.
Right.
You know, so it's a lot of perceived danger. But like I said, the biggest issue with alcohol is a lot of the younger students who go to colleges will go to fraternity parties, will go there, and they don't understand limits, and they will just keep drinking, or they will drink hard alcohol and in excess, and again, they don't know how to limit it.
Okay, thank you.